This is a ReeTV documentary, JonBenét Ramsey. On to the long-awaited, by a very small handful of people, episode 5 of the ReeTV JonBenét Ramsey documentary series. In previous episodes, I've mentioned what content may be in each episode of this series, but I have found that the more research I do, the further I get away from the original plan. So I know some of you are waiting for the statement analysis of the parents' numerous interviews, and I will get around to it, I promise. But let's face it, we all know the outcome of that video. The parents are liars. I can go through each interview and point out every time that they are deceptive, or I can show stuff that matters. I will get around to the interviews given by the families and anyone else I can find, but for now, do you remember in the first episode when FBI profiler Candice DeLong said,
"In the 35 years I've been doing this, I've never seen a case like the unsolved murder of JonBenét Ramsey."
To which I said, well, I have. Remember Madeleine McCann? The only difference between these cases is the location. Both sets of parents show signs of early childhood sexual abuse. Both show signs of sexual abuse against their children, and both staged a kidnapping. The McCanns have made millions off of the death of their child. Did they get tips from the Ramseys? And what about Charles Lindbergh's baby? And why is Jerry smiling? At the time of recording that, I was focused on the similarities between the Ramsey and McCann cases, and as I was listening to my recording back, I remembered that from my research for the Amelia Earhart series, that Charles Lindbergh's baby was kidnapped and murdered, and there were similarities between all three of these cases. It's the Lindbergh case I'm interested in right now. It appears that I am not the only person who can or could see that the Lindbergh and Ramsey cases are the same. There were many people involved in this case, and I will eventually get around to uploading an episode on the who's who of this case, but for now, let's talk about Darnay Hoffman. Darnay Hoffman was a New York lawyer and self-described victims' rights advocate. He defended subway gunman Bernie Goetz, as well as the infamous child killer Joel Steinberg. He married and divorced Sidney Biddle Barrows, the one-time Mayflower Madam who ran an exclusive call girl service in the 1980s. He also defended two of the people that the Ramseys defense team defamed in an attempt to shift the blame onto as many people as possible to cause confusion and, of course, reasonable doubt for any murder case being brought against the Ramseys. Oh, and I probably shouldn't forget to mention that his death in 2011 was classified as suicide. The only problem with that is, if we are to believe the official cause of death, we are expected to believe that he stabbed himself in the heart. I don't believe for a second that Darnay Hoffman stabbed himself in the heart. So he was either murdered or is controlled opposition and he never actually died. All just a part of the pantomime. So you're probably a little confused now as to why I started with Charles Lindbergh and went on to Darnay Hoffman. Where is the relevance? Near the beginning of the long-running Ramsey pantomime, a little over 3 months after the world had first heard the name JonBenét Ramsey, on the 11th of March 1997, New York lawyer Darnay Hoffman sent a letter to the District Attorney Alex Hunter regarding the JonBenét Ramsey case that his office was working on, and how he believed there to be similarities in the kidnapping and murdering of pioneering aviator Charles Lindbergh's baby and that of the Ramsey case. I was already convinced that these three cases were linked, but to find a lawyer at the time who felt so strongly about the similarities between these two cases that he actually took the time to write to the district attorney to outline those similarities, which were obviously completely ignored. Some of you may not be aware of who Charles Lindbergh, aka Lucky Lindy, is, so I'll give you a quick overview. This is directly from his biography. Charles Augustus Lindbergh, born in 1902 and died in 1974, was a pioneering American aviator who made the first solo non-stop flight across the Atlantic Ocean on the 20th to the 21st of May 1927. Other pilots had crossed the Atlantic before him, but Lindbergh was the first person to do it alone non-stop. This immediately gained him international fame. The press named him Lucky Lindy and the Lone Eagle, Americans and Europeans idolized the shy, slim young man and showered him with honors. Now I'm going to stop there because the rest is just pure bull. So on to Charles Lindbergh Jr. On the 22nd of June 1930, Anne's 24th birthday, the Lindberghs welcomed their first child, a son they named Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., or Charlie. Almost immediately, requests for photographs came in from the press and admiration flowers from the public. During this time, the Lindberghs were building a house in a remote area near the town of Hopewell, New Jersey. On the night of the 1st of March 1932, the baby was stolen from his crib in a second-floor bedroom while both Lindberghs and several staff were elsewhere in the house. A ransom note, a broken ladder propped against the outside wall, and other clues were discovered. The Hopewell house was turned into the headquarters of the police investigation, and over the next few weeks, numerous letters and tips poured in. Through go-betweens, the Lindberghs allegedly paid $50,000 in ransom to a man claiming to have information about the baby. When Lindbergh went to where the baby was said to be held, it turned out to be a hoax. 10 weeks after the kidnapping on the 15th of May, the body of a toddler was found partially buried in the woods near the Lindbergh home. Charles Lindbergh identified the body as that of his son, who had apparently died the night he was taken. During my research into this letter, I found numerous claims that it was questionable as to whether the body was indeed that of Chaz Jr., and as a result of recent questions, the American Lindberghs removed the bone fragments from a museum, thus removing any possible way of testing for DNA to see if they were indeed fragments of Chaz Jr. I refer to them as the American Lindberghs because Charles Lindbergh had a secret German family. Oh, no, wait, Charles Lindbergh had 3 secret German families. Quite fitting, as he was said to be a Nazi sympathizer. The worst part about this case? An innocent man was executed less than a year after he was wrongfully convicted. So let's get to the letter from Darnay Hoffman to DA Alex Hunter. Dated the 11th of March 1997 regarding the Lindbergh kidnapping case and JonBenét Ramsey. Dear Mr. Hunter, I am a criminal and civil defense attorney in New York City. I recently defended subway gunman Bernard Goetz in a civil trial in New York, and I am a former law student of Barry Scheck. I have been following your investigation into the Ramsey case with great interest, and I would like to bring certain similarities between the Lindbergh kidnapping case and the Ramsey case to your attention. First and most important, every member of the Lindbergh household, with the exception of Charles and Anne, were under suspicion from the moment the police began their investigation. With what we know about infant homicides today, Lindbergh would have been prime suspect himself, and for very good reasons. Number 1. When the Lindbergh baby was first discovered missing, both Anne Morrow Lindbergh and the nursemaid Betty Gow immediately suspected Charles Lindbergh. In fact, Betty Gow's first words to Lindbergh were, "Colonel, do you have the baby? Please don't fool me." Number 2, Anne Morrow Lindbergh, in her 2nd of March 1932 letter to her mother-in-law, a letter she prefaces with the warning that she'd better destroy after reading, observes that she, Betty Gow, thought that C, Charles Lindbergh, had taken the baby for a joke. I did also, until I saw his face. Lindbergh was never able to give police a complete account of his whereabouts on the day of the kidnapping. He mysteriously forgot to attend a dinner given by NYU with Lindbergh scheduled as guest of honor, or why he arrived home early just prior to the time when his son was kidnapped. Lindbergh claimed vaguely that he couldn't remember the events of the day. 3. 2 months before the 1st of March kidnapping, Charles Lindbergh had played a cruel practical joke on his wife and the nursemaid by hiding his son, Charles Jr., in a closet for 20 minutes while announcing melodramatically that someone had kidnapped the baby. Lindbergh watched with silent glee at the sheer terror and panic as members of his household frantically tried to find the child. Finally, Lindbergh triumphantly produced the baby from its hiding place. 4. Lindbergh himself was the one who discovered the ransom note, even though the place where he had found it on the windowsill in the baby's bedroom had already been searched by his wife and the nursemaid. 5. Lindbergh inexplicably allowed the crime scene to become contaminated by both the press and the police by insisting they follow him around the grounds en masse, trampling all over footprints that had been left in the mud around the house. Remarkably, Lindbergh did this despite the great show he made of waiting patiently for nearly 2 hours for a police technician to arrive with fingerprint equipment before opening the ransom note. 6. Lindbergh tried to prevent his household staff from being questioned by police or subject to polygraphs. 7. Upon discovering his son was kidnapped, the first person Lindbergh called before calling the police was his lawyer. 8. Lindbergh tried to divert the police investigation by bringing in outside investigators while insisting that the kidnapping was the work of outsiders, i.e. professional kidnappers. Mob boss Frank Costello was so unimpressed with this theory that he advised Lindbergh to forget about paying any ransom money because, in his opinion, the child was already dead and that the kidnapping had all the earmarks of an amateur at work. 9. Lindbergh refused to allow the FBI to investigate the case, preferring instead to allow the inexperienced New Jersey State Police, headed by Colonel Norman Schwarzkopf, father of Stormin' Norman, who had no prior police experience except as a floor walker at Bamberger's department store. He was politically appointed to the New Jersey State Troopers to handle the investigation. Schwarzkopf made a mess of the investigation, which was the general idea. 10. J. Edgar Hoover, along with some of his agents, believed that Lindbergh was lying about what he knew about the circumstances surrounding his son's kidnapping. Later on, Hoover also came to believe that Lindbergh lied about his voice identification of Hoffman as Cemetery John. Moreover, a Bronx grand juror hearing the case asked rather incredulously how it was possible for Lindbergh to be certain he could identify Hoffman's voice from hundreds of feet away, and remembered it 2 years later when Hoffman was finally captured as the kidnapper. Hoover was so frustrated by Lindbergh's stonewalling that he encouraged Congress to pass the federal Lindbergh kidnapping law, so the FBI would have jurisdiction to investigate. Hoover was so suspicious of Lindbergh and his lying that he opened an FBI surveillance file on him, which he eventually shared with Franklin Roosevelt, who suspected Lindbergh of pro-Nazi sympathies. 11. Lindbergh refused to allow the New Jersey State Police or anyone from law enforcement to listen in on any phone calls he received concerning the kidnapping that might contain clues. 12. Lindbergh tried to prevent the Treasury Department from recording and marking any of the kidnap ransom money so that it could not be traced afterwards. 13. Lindbergh let members of the underworld have copies of the kidnap ransom note, even though the police wanted to hold back giving out the unique kidnapper's signature, which police knew would be a vital clue in determining whether or not future communications from the kidnapper were legitimately from him, and not from the thousands of hoaxers plaguing the case. 14. When the Lindbergh baby was eventually found in May of 1932, 2 months after the kidnapping, police discovered that someone had hurriedly dumped the body into a shallow ditch within sight of the Lindbergh home. Had Lindbergh not prevented a 10-mile search for his son by police bloodhounds when the child was first discovered missing, authorities would have known from the beginning that the baby had died within minutes of having been kidnapped, and would have treated the matter as a homicide instead of as a kidnapping. As a result, Lindbergh would not have been an anxious parent hoping to effect the return of his son, but would instead have been the parent of a murdered victim, and therefore unable to personally direct or control a police investigation into a homicide. 15. The initial autopsy of the Lindbergh baby was so sloppy that police could never really be sure of the cause of death. In fact, the child might have been suffocated first and then hit on the head in order to cover up the real cause of death. One recent theory of the kidnapping has Lindbergh repeating his practical joke of hiding the baby, only to have it go horribly wrong. The child suffocates and is then bashed in the head to look as if accidentally dropped out of the window by an anxious kidnapper making an all too hasty getaway on an awkwardly constructed ladder used to gain entrance to the second-story bedroom window. 16. Lindbergh immediately ordered the cremation of his son without any further tests or examinations by qualified forensic pathologists. Remember how careful Lindbergh was with respect to fingerprints on the ransom note? Was that because Lindbergh knew there would be no fingerprints? Michael Baden in the October 1983 Journal of the Forensic Sciences stated that fractured skull diagnosis was wrong for 2 reasons. There was no fracture, just a separation of the unfused skull bones, which is normal in all babies, and there was no brain damage. It's the brain damage, not the fracture, that would cause death. The baby was probably smothered at the time of kidnapping kidnapping to keep him from crying out and alerting the family and nurses who were all in nearby rooms. 17. Whoever kidnapped the Lindbergh baby was intimately familiar with the large rambling Lindbergh estate home. The kidnap ladder was placed directly under the child's second-story bedroom window. Remarkably, there were no ladder marks under the other windows, which means the kidnapper was incredibly lucky to find the right window on the first try without trial and error, or he knew the right window from some prior knowledge. The shutters to the baby's bedroom window, moreover, were the only ones that couldn't latch closed from the inside and therefore would not need to be forcibly opened. 18. Apparently the kidnapper was not afraid of detection. What else could explain a kidnapping which took place sometime between 7:30 and 9:30 in a house full of people and servants, fully lit, with someone quite capable of walking in on the kidnapper at any given moment? The kidnapper, furthermore, was not worried about the child screaming or making any noise. Was that because the child would not cry if the kidnapper was someone it already knew? 19. The Lindbergh family Boston Terrier, Wargoosh, was reported to be a neurotically nervous dog who barked at any strange sound or person. That night, not a peep. 20. The Lindbergh family never stayed at their home during the weekdays, preferring instead to stay with Anne Morrow's parents, an hour away in Inglewood, New Jersey, which was closer to New York City where Charles worked during the week. The decision to remain at their home a day or two longer was made at the last minute and could have only been known by members of the immediate family and household staff. Professional kidnappers staking out the Lindberghs would have known from the meticulous routine kept by Charles that the family could be expected to be staying with Anne's family and the country home where the baby was kidnapped. This was why the police insisted for over 2 years that the kidnapping was an inside job. Even Hoffman's defense attorneys argued that there was no way a Bronx carpenter would have known what the Lindberghs were doing at the last minute, 2 hours away in the backwoods of New Jersey, to then rush out there and kidnap Charles Jr. 21. Police investigating the crime noted that there were no fingerprints of any kind in the baby's bedroom. None. Not even fingerprints normally associated with the baby, his mother, the nursemaid, household staff, or even Charles. One police officer remarked afterwards that it appeared to him as if someone had purposely wiped down the whole of the room to remove it of any fingerprints, a task too dangerously time-consuming for a stranger and would-be kidnapper. In short, the Lindberghs and the Ramsey cases have one very important theme in common. They are both kidnap hoaxes perpetrated by the parties really responsible, who must hide in plain sight in the hopes of throwing off police. In the first case involving Lindbergh, the hoax was successful. In the second involving the Ramseys, only for a time. Yet in each case, the kidnapper was able to successfully bring about a breakdown of normal police procedures in what would have been routine domestic homicide investigations. Instead, the police were tricked into believing the crime to be a kidnapping instead of a murder, with devastating consequences for the destruction and contamination of potential crime scene evidence. If you would like to consult with me further on this case, I would be more than happy to speak with you. You were doing a very difficult investigation under nearly impossible circumstances. The fact that my former law professor Barry Sheck has agreed to consult with you makes me even more eager to help. Good luck on this case. Very truly yours, Darnay Hoffman. I think Hoffman was spot on here. The only part I don't agree with is, yet in each case, the kidnapper was able to successfully bring about a breakdown of normal police procedure into what should have been routine domestic homicide investigations. Instead, the police were tricked into believing the crime to be a kidnapping. I don't for a second believe anyone was tricked into anything. This was a cover-up from the highest levels. If you can't see the link between all of these big cases, and not just the three I have mentioned, it's likely that you wouldn't believe the truth when you actually do come across it. I believe it was Aleister Crowley under his pen name Mark Twain who said, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled." I'm quoting a despicable person here, but the words are nonetheless true. He also said, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on." Darnay Hoffman's letter mentions the ransom note that Charles Lindbergh claims was left on the windowsill in the nursery, even though Anne and the nursemaid had previously checked there. So I wondered, how long and crazy is this ransom note? Surely it's not crazy long and rambling on like the JonBenét Ramsey and the Barbara Mackle ransom notes. Let's have a look. Okay, so at first glance, it's not crazy long, seems straight to the point, looks like a child wrote it and is barely legible. I could just about make out some of it, and I have relied on transcripts for the following. Dear Sir, have $50,000 ready, $25,000 in $20 bills, $15,000 in $10 bills, and $10,000 in $5 bills. After 2 to 4 days, we will inform you where to deliver the money. We warn you for making anything public or notify the police the child is in good care. Indication for all letters are signature and 3 holes. And the signature, which consisted of 2 circles interlocking, which appear to have 3 square holes punched, one in each of the circles and one in the resulting oval where the 2 circles interlock. The circles were blue in colour and the oval was red. Kind of sounds like a foreign faction wrote it to me. So nothing too weird then, right? Well, I thought not. Until I realised there was more than one note. Let's have a look at the second note, with thanks to Lindbergh kidnapping hoax, where I got the information for the following. After the first, another ransom note was received. The note arrived via mail on the 6th of March 1932. It was postmarked Brooklyn, New York, 4th of March. The second note demanded an increased ransom of $70,000. The arrival of the note spurred a police conference at Trenton, New Jersey to decide what should be done about the case. Again, the second note is barely legible, and I'm relying on other people's transcripts, which don't look completely correct, but here goes. Dear Sir, we have warned you not to make anything public, nor notify the police. Now you have to take the consequences. This means we hold the baby until everything is quiet. We cannot make any appointments just now. We know very well what it means to us. Is it really necessary to make a world affair out of this, or to get your baby back as soon as possible to settle those affairs in a quick way will be better for both. Don't be afraid about the baby, keeping care of us day and night. We also will feed him according to the diet. We are interested to send him back in good health, and ransom was made us for $50,000, but now we have to take another person to it and probably have to keep the baby for a longer time than we expected. So the amount will be $70,000, $20,000 in $50 bills, $25,000 in $20 bills, and $15,000 in $10 bills, and $10,000 in $5 bills. Don't mark any of the bills or take them from one serial number. We will inform you later where to deliver the money, but we will not do so until the police is out of the case and papers are quiet. The kidnapping we prepared for years, so we prepared for everything. What the actual Now this is starting to sound eerily similar to 2 other crazy ransom notes we've already come across. But wait, there's more. There weren't only 2 ransom notes, not 3 ransom notes, nor 4, or even 5. There were 13 ransom notes. 13. If you know anything about Masonic numerology, you'll have a field day with that one. It was received by Colonel Henry Breckenridge, Lindbergh's attorney, on the 8th of March. This note requested a note in the newspaper from someone to act as an intermediary. Dear Sir, did you receive our letter from March 4th? We sent the mail on one off the letter box near Borough Hall, Brooklyn. We know police interfere with your private mail. How can we come to any arrangement this way? In the future, we will send our letters to Mr. Breckenridge at 25 Broadway. We believe police captured 2 letters and not forwarded to you. We will not accept any go-between from your scent, whatever that means. We will arrange the latter. There is no worry about the boy. He is very well and will be fed according to the diet. Best thank for information about it. We are interested to send your boy back in good health. Signature. Is it necessary to make a world affair out of it, or to get your boy back as soon as possible? Why did you ignore our letter which we left in the room? The baby would be back long ago. You would not get any result from the police because our kidnapping was planned for a year already. But we were afraid the boy would not be strong enough. Our ransom was made out for $50,000, but now we have to put another lady to it, as probably have to hold the baby longer as we expected, so it will be $70,000, $20,000 in $50 bills, $25,000 in $25 bills, $15,000 in $10 bills, and $10,000 in $5 bills. We warn you again not to mark any bill or take them from one serial number. We will inform you later how to deliver the money, but not before the police is out of this case and the papers are quiet. I can't make out the last two lines. A 72-year-old retired school principal, red flag, inserted himself into the investigation. As a continual contributor to the letters section of the Bronx Home News, he advertised himself as an intermediary for the Lindbergh family, offering $1,000 of his own life savings as an added reward for the return of the child. As a result of that single letter, he managed to make himself the most publicized person in the entire case and became the worldwide target of much hate and controversy throughout this story of the century. He is still today one of the most suspicious characters in the entire case. Even the man who would end up wrongly executed for this alleged crime, Richard Hoffman, believed John Jaffsey Condon held the key to his cell. The letter that Dr. Condon had written to the Bronx Home News read as follows: I have followed your columns since the pioneer days, and now I ask that you go even beyond the realm of journalism into speculative philosophy for the benefit of Colonel Charles Lindbergh's child. I have written stories, the content of which have been drawn from first-handed sources, yet I have never betrayed a confidence. Even now, one of those stories is being considered in a western town with a view to publication. With a view to assisting the brave colonel and his devoted wife Mrs. Lindbergh to bring back to her bosom the tender offspring with busting arms around her neck, with his little fingers causing that joy which offers no parallel in the world and which only a mother can experience, I make an offer to the kidnappers with the instruction as to how to proceed to restore the beautiful baby to its mother's arms. I offer $1,000 for anyone who can prove my satisfaction in the history of the world where a Catholic priest has ever betrayed the secrets of a confessional. It is upon this universe that I wish to help Colonel Lindbergh as follows. And then the advertisement to the kidnapper read as follows. To the kidnapper, in addition to the $50,000 offered by the colonel, I offer $1,000, which I have saved from my salary, if the one who handed the colonel's son out of the window to the man on the ladder will go to a Catholic priest and confess his or her transgression, giving the child unharmed to any priest whom the kidnapper will name. I stand ready in person at my own expense to go anywhere, alone, on land or water, to give the kidnapper the extra money and promise never to utter his or her name to anyone. I appeal to the mother of the child for the sake of him who suffered at Mount Calvary before his mother, who suffered anguish and whose heart was pierced with sorrow. Instead of threats and thoughts of punishment for erring one, I appeal to the inner soul of the man or woman. For the sake of his own mother, that he may offer restitution for his crime, I offer all that I could scrape together, $1,000 of my own money, so that a loving mother may again have her darling child, so that people will know that the greatest criminal in the world has a bright spot in his heart, and that Colonel Charles Lindbergh may know that the American people, of whom I claim to be one, are grateful for the honor that he bestowed upon the United States by his pluck and daring. Let the kidnapper who may be here among us know that I write of my own free will, that no testimony of mine or coming from me will be used against him, and that this is an appeal for the sake of humanity. While I gave all that I can to him, $1,000, just for being manly by giving back the child to his mother, John F. Condon. I mean, what can you say about that? As it stands in 2020, he would have just made himself prime suspect. Have you seen my Crocodile Tears series? Darren Vickers comes to mind. He actually received a reply. Of course he did, because he wrote it. The note agreed that Dr. Condon would be the go-between and read as follows. Dear Sir, if you're willing to act as a go-between in the Lindbergh case, please follow strictly instruction. Hand enclosed letter personally to Mr. Lindbergh. It will explain everything. Don't tell anyone about it. As soon as we find out the press or police is notified, everything will be cancelled and it will be a further delay. After you get the money from Mr. Lindbergh, put these 3 words in the New York American. Money is ready. After notice, we will give you further instruction. Don't be afraid, we are not out for your $1,000. keep it. Only act strictly. Be home every night between 6 and 12. By this time you will hear from us. Also inside the letter was an envelope. On that envelope was another message written, Dear Sir, please hand enclosed letter to Colonel Lindbergh. It is in Mr. Lindbergh's interest not to notify the police. The fourth ransom note was to confirm Mr. Condon as the go-between and referred to the multiple previous times that the kidnapper had confirmed the exact denominations of banknotes that the ransom money must contain. Once again, sounds all too familiar. This note even had an illustration of the exact size of attaché that the money should arrive in. I do not believe in coincidences. In some people's mind, twice may be a coincidence, but 3 times is surely a pattern. Quoting another despicable person here, but despicable people are awake to the reality of this despicable world. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. If you believe in coincidences, it's very likely that you have never investigated anything enough to find a pattern. Anyway, let's try to read the content of the fourth ransom note. Again, the transcription I have taken from Lindbergh kidnapping hoax. Mr. Colonel Lindbergh, Hopewell. Dear Sir, Mr. Condon may act as go-between. You may give him the $70,000. Make 1 packet, the size will be about, refer to the illustration of the exact size of attaché. We have notified you already in what kind of bills. We warn you not to set any trap in any way. If you or someone else will notify the police, there will be a further delay. After we have the money in hand, we will tell you where to find your boy. You may have an airplane ready. It is about 150 miles away, but before telling you the address, a delay of 8 hours will be between. It's starting to become explicitly clear just where the content of the Barbara Mackle and JonBenét ransom notes came from, and actually raises some serious questions about the Barbara Mackle case. Maybe that case was intended to end the same way, but her father changed his mind? Maybe they all sold their souls to the same devil. One thing I know is, I don't believe in coincidences. I'm also slightly concerned for my safety. Condon contacted Lindbergh and drove out to Hopewell with his boxing friend, Al Reich. Condon had also once been a boxer. The Lindberghs agreed to have Dr. Condon act as an intermediary after he was shown the letters and saw the familiar signature at the bottom, the 2 interlocked circles. Dr. Condon used the newspapers to correspond with the kidnappers with the codename Jafsy, derived from his initials JFC. On the 11th of March, Dr. Condon followed the next set of orders. He had the New York American print Money is Ready, Jafsy. This conversation, using the newspapers, continued throughout the month and of course kept Dr. Condon in constant contact with the ransom note writers. On the 12th of March, Condon received an anonymous telephone call and a 5th ransom note. The note was delivered by taxi driver Joseph Peroni, who claimed the note was given to him by a stranger. The note informed Condon that another note could be found beneath a stone near the subway station. He followed the instructions in the 5th note and found the 6th note. The 5th note contained the following. Mr. Condon, we trust you, but we will not come in your house. It is too dangerous. Even you could not know if police or Secret Service is watching you. Follow this instruction. Take a car and drive to the last subway station from Jerome Avenue. Here, 100 feet from the last station on the left is an empty Frankfurter stand with a big open porch around. You will find a notice in the centre of the porch underneath a stone. The notice will tell you where to find us. Act accordingly. After 3/4 of an hour, be on the place. Bring money with you. Dr. Condon, along with his boxer friend Al Reich acting as his bodyguard, followed the instructions and found the 6th note. Cross the street and follow the fence from the cemetery direction to 233rd Street. I will meet you. The 6th note demanded that Condon meet the kidnapper at Woodlawn Cemetery, which is located near 233rd Street and Jerome Avenue. This would be the location of the first contact with a man named John, from then on known as Cemetery John. The meeting was unsuccessful. Without the money, no child could be handed over, John said. Okay, so Dr. John F. Condon meets a guy called John. Do they have the same name because they're the same person? On the 16th of March, a 7th ransom note and a baby's sleeper was sent to Condon. Lindbergh agreed the sleeper was his child's, and Condon continued to run advertisements in the newspaper. The 7th note read, and bear with me because it's barely legible: "Dear Sir, our man failed to collect the money. There are no more confidential conference after we meeting from March 12. Those arrangements too hazardous for us. We will not allow our man to confer in a way like before. Circumstances will not allow us to make a transfer like you wish. It is impossible for us. Why should we move the baby and face danger? To take another person to the place is entirely out of question. It seems you are afraid. We are the right party, and if the baby is all right, well, you have our signature. It is always the same as the first one, especially them 3 holes. Now we will send you the sleeping suit from the baby. Besides, it means $3 extra expense because we have to pay another one. Please tell Mrs. Lindbergh not to worry, the baby is well. We only have to give him more food, as the diet says. You are willing to pay the $70,000, not $50,000, without seeing the baby first, or not? Let us know about that in the New York American. We can't do it other ways because we don't like to give up our safety place or to move the baby. If you are willing to accept this deal, put this in paper. I accept, money is ready. Our program is, after 8 hours we have the money received, we will notify you where to find the baby. If there is any trap, you will be responsible for what follows." On the 21st of March 1932, an 8th note was given to Dr. Condon. The 8th note read something along the lines of, "Dear Sir, you and Mr. Lindbergh know our program. If you don't accept, then we will wait until you agree with our deal. We know you have to come to us anyway, but why should Mr. and Mrs. Lindbergh suffer longer as necessary? We will not communicate with you or Mr. Lindbergh until you write so in the paper. We will tell you again, this kidnapping case was prepared for a year already, so the police won't have any look to find us or the child. You only push everything further out. Did you send that little package to Mr. Lindbergh? It contains the sleeping suit from the baby. The baby as well. Mr. Lindbergh only wasting time with his search." On the 29th of March, the baby's nurse, Betty Gow, discovered the baby's thumb guard, the one the baby wore at the time of the kidnapping. The next day, a 9th ransom note was given to Condon. The 9th note read along the lines of, "Dear Sir, it is not necessary to furnish any code. You and Mr. Lindbergh know our program very well. We will keep the child in our safe place until we have the money in hand. But if the deal is not closed until the 8th of April, we will ask for 30,000 more. Also not 70,000 to 100,000. How can Mr. Lindbergh follow so many false clues he knows we're in the right party? Our signature is still the same as in the ransom note, but if Mr. Lindbergh likes to fool around for another month, we can help it. Once he has come to us anyway, but if he keeps on waiting, we will double our amount. There is absolutely no fear about the child. It is well." On the 1st of April 1932, a 10th note arrived. The 10th note read along the lines of, "Dear Sir, have the money ready by Saturday evening. We will inform you where and how to deliver it. Have the money in one bundle. We want you to put it in a certain place. There is no fear that somebody else will take it. We watch everything closely. Please let us know if you are agree and read for action Saturday evening. If yes, put in the paper, yes, everything okay. It is very simple delivery, but we will find out very soon if there is any trap. After 8 hours, you get the address from the boy. On the place, you find 2 ladies. They are innocent. If it is too late, we put in the New York American for Saturday morning, put it in New York Journal." The next day, 2nd of April, Condon received an 11th note from an unidentified taxi driver, which instructed him to a greenhouse at 3225 East Tremont Avenue, Bronx, New York, to find the 12th note. The 11th note read, "Dear Sir, take a car and follow Tremont Avenue to the east until you reach the number 3225 East Tremont Avenue. It is a nursery. Bergen. Greenhouse florists. There is a table stand outside right on the door. You find a letter underneath the table covered with a stone. Read and follow instruction. Don't speak to anyone on the way. If there is a radio alarm from police car, we warn you we have the same equipment. Have the money in one bundle. We give you 3/4 of an hour to reach the place." The 12th note agreed on another meeting to occur that night. The 12th note read, Cross the street and walk to the next corner and follow Whittenmore Avenue to the south. Take the money with you. Come alone and walk. I will meet you. Condon met with whom he assumed was John in hopes of reducing the ransom demand to $50,000. Dr. Condon gave the man $50,000 in gold certificates in exchange for a 13th note and a receipt. The 13th note read somewhere along the lines of, "The boy is on Bode Nelly. It is a small boat." I'm not sure if that means boat. 28 feet long, 2 persons are on the boat. They are innocent. You will find the boat between Horseneck Beach and Gay Head near Elizabeth Island. Authorities searched near Martha's Vineyard twice, but the search was unsuccessful. No one accompanied Condon on his talks with John, but Condon insisted he could positively identify the man if he met with him again. After the note was read and a search was held at the location spoke of in the letter, it was quite clear that Condon was deceived. The baby was still missing, and $50,000 in ransom money, which Condon gave to John, after curiously bargaining the extortionist down from the $70,000 originally demanded in the ransom notes. The question of money was none of Condon's business, and why he took it upon himself to intervene with John is not quite clear. Whether it was $50,000 or $70,000, it all seemed like a pittance anyway compared to what real kidnappers might have asked for the world's most famous baby. Such a small ransom demand is extremely suspicious for the same reasons that it is suspicious in this case. Although the police doubted that Condon could help any further, he vowed to help put the baby back in its mother's arms. He prepared transcripts of the conversations he had with John during the 2 meetings. Later in March of 1934, he turned the transcripts into phonograph records, imitating the voice of John so that it would be easy to recognise the voice in the future. I guess he could do that because it was his own voice. Maybe? Before Hoffman's arrest, the police suspected Condon of having been involved with the baby's disappearance. After Hoffman's arrest, however, Condon was asked to help with the Lindbergh case by identifying Hoffman as Cemetery John. At first, Condon refused to identify Hoffman as John. It took him some time before he agreed to do what the police wanted of him. In fact, Condon told the police that he could not be sure, and since a man's life depended on his identification, he wanted to be more positive. Finally, and there is little doubt of this, police pressure convinced Condon that Hoffman was the right man. Condon never made a request for reward money after Hoffman's execution, as so many other witnesses did. As a kid, when I found out that multiple actors had become politicians throughout history, Nixon being the obvious example here, that blew my mind. How the hell can an actor become a politician? It wasn't until many years later that I realised they do the same job. Think about it. A politician's only job is to influence an entire nation. They have different parties to give you the impression that you have a choice. This is not democracy. This is called controlled opposition. But politicians can't influence everyone. Cue the entertainment and sports industries. You can bet that between the politicians, musicians, and actors, that they influence and ultimately control the thoughts and behaviours of 99% of the nation. They're bred into it. This case didn't just sound like a Hollywood movie, it was a Hollywood movie, and it still is. That kid wasn't kidnapped and he wasn't murdered, but you have to wait until I cover this case in more detail to find out where he is.
Hauptmann, haggard and worn, is brought from the cells. In picturesque tones, the clerk of the court summons all to order before the judge enters.
All manner of persons having business to do with this court to come, please.
Look at this scene. A courtroom so packed that there's not an inch of space available, while excited chatter and buzz fills the air. And at the end of each day's hearing, they are locked up for the night in their hotel.
Century continues at Flemington, New Jersey, with faces, grim faces, questioning faces, serious faces filling the courtroom. The court reporter and his assistants take down every word of the proceedings by machine. Press cables to world centers describe the grim-faced parade to court. Stern Colonel Schwarzkopf and Anne Lindbergh. Colonel Lindbergh, who believes Hauptmann the kidnapper. Betty Gow, the murdered baby's nurse. With the defense is anxious Mrs. Hauptmann, wife of the accused, and nervous Bruno Richard Hauptmann, the prisoner whose life is in the hands of the jury. Here they are, gray-haired Foreman Walton, Charles Snyder in gray suit, Ethel Stockton, Philip Hockenberry, Robert Cravat wearing eyeglasses, gray-haired Elmer Smith, George Voorhees, Mrs. May Brailsford also wearing glasses, followed by Liscombe Case and Howard Biggs. Faces, serious faces. Hauptmann talking things over with his wife. Edward J. Riley, Chief Defense Counsel. And Mrs. Ollie Watley on left with Betty Gow, all faced with the tragedy told by these baby garments of little Lindbergh. The first is the garment made by Betty Gow, the one she sewed. The second is the baby shirt which he wore over the first garment on the night that he was kidnapped. And last but not least, the sleeping suit, identified as the one baby Lindbergh wore, which the prosecution contends is the one turned over by Hauptmann in return for the ransom. Again, Mrs. Lindbergh in the center of picture is reminded of that tragic night by the little thumb guard torn from the baby's suit. Hauptmann smiles defiantly as he leaves the courtroom. Is he guilty or not guilty? Artists' pictures. Comment by Arthur Brisbane. Words, words, and still more words of damning evidence, of doubt, of identification. Words that span oceans and continents, that interest the man on the street from New York to Timbuktu. More than 400 reporters cover the trial, turning out miles of copy to the tune of clicking keys.
This episode is already too long, so I'm not going to analyse all 3 notes together in as much detail as the Barbara Mackle episode in this video, but I will give a couple of the most obvious examples. Okay, I'm bored. That's all I can be bothered to do. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, pretty please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Peace! You've been watching a ReeTV documentary.